So why don't we just begin with a word of prayer, and we'll get into what we're doing today. Father, we thank you for yourself today. And we thank you for a knowledge of who you are from your word. We thank you for a knowledge of ourselves as sinners through your word. And we thank you for the revelation of the Lord Jesus Christ and for his life, for his death, for his resurrection, in order that we might be saved from sin. And we thank you that we have that knowledge because we have your word and we know your word. And we thank you too, Father, that your word is practical for us day by day in our lives as we as mothers seek to raise children for their good and for your glory. And we just pray, Father, this morning as we come from many different backgrounds, many different homes, many different types of personalities in our homes, we thank you that you can take your word and make it relevant to just where we live in a very personal and intimate way. And we need that this morning, Father. And we trust that our hearts will be encouraged. We trust that we will grow together. We trust that we will encourage one another, that we will get to know one another and really minister to one another. And as we look today, Father, in the area of contentment and of neatness, that it will suit our needs and make a difference in our homes. And we'll just thank you and praise you for what you're going to accomplish in our group today. And we ask it in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. And for his sake we pray. Amen. Good morning. Grab yourself a bite to eat. And those of you who are coming in, fear not to sign in and pick up a sheet that you can fill in. And I must remember a screwdriver next month for this stand. Did you turn that happy thing on? Good. First, let me thank you for the card that came from this group to our home just a few days ago. For those of you who are aware, since we met the last time, our life at our house has been a bit different. I suppose I was here on Wednesday, and I got a call a few days after. My father-in-law said to me, I picked up the phone. It was very interesting how God works. 8:45 that Friday morning, I was praying and saying, Lord, if you would have me to go down and look after Steve's folks for a few days, I want to do that. But I want to know that this is what you would have me to do. Because, lots of times folks really enjoy taking care of themselves. My mother and father-in-law are very independent people since my dad retired from Philadelphia Electric. Steve's father, I call him my dad. But since Steve's dad retired from Philadelphia Electric, they served the Lord as short-term missionaries in India and in Kenya. And he's been on the board of many prominent mission organizations and whatever, a very active man. He had a massive heart attack, I think I told you, when I came back from serving in Europe this summer. My father-in-law had a massive heart attack while I was there, and he was recovering. And my mom was a bit discouraged and whatever, and so I just was looking to the Lord for an opportunity to go. So 8:45 Friday morning, I was praying, Lord, if you want me to go, make it plain. And at 9 o'clock, the phone rang. And my father-in-law said, Nance, we're making your bed. And so I said, okay, Dad, I'll be down. I'll see if I can get a plane reservation for Sunday. And so I flew down on Sunday, and he had been losing weight steadily. He had lost 40 pounds. And so we got his food regulated somewhat between Mother and I and his pills, of which he was taking like 70 a week. If you can believe that. I couldn't believe that. This is a man who'd never been in the hospital a day of his life and is never sick. Anyway, we had a wonderful 4 days. He and I went shopping. We even went out for dinner, all three of us, one night. We played board games in the evenings, which he enjoys. He was taking walks. He was really encouraged about his eating. Even by the time I left, had started to gain a few pounds, and it was a wonderful, wonderful 4 days from Sunday to Thursday. It was just really great. And so he and Mother insisted on taking me to the airport on Thursday morning when I went. There was other ways I could have gotten there, but they really wanted to take me. And so I kissed them goodbye. I got on the airplane, and Dad and Mother went back home to their retirement place where they are. And Dad said, I think I'm going to sit in my easy chair and take a nap. I'm tired. I feel a little tired, which he took several naps during the course of a day anyway, while his heart was mending. And he sat on his easy chair and went into the presence of the Lord, just like that. No struggle, no clenched fist, no nothing. He sat in the chair. Mother went and laid down. A couple hours later, Mother woke up and went in, and he didn't look quite right. And she went over, and he had obviously been with the Lord for a few hours. And so, in the plan and providence of God and the sovereignty of God, it it's just incredible how the Lord worked all that out, because I was able to do a lot of heavy cleaning while I was there. And of course, there were hordes of people in the house after, and the support from different people, just the emotional support that different people gave to Mother until the rest of the family could get there. And in God's timing, it was just incredible that all of our family, the 7 of us from Havertown, and the 6 from Ellicott City, Maryland, and the 8, whatever they are anyway, who live in southern Florida, the whole family was there in Florida for the funeral. And it was just really exciting. His 16 grandchildren were all there. And his 6 oldest grandsons were the pallbearers. And their ages were from 19 to 14. And it was really exciting to watch them bear their grandfather to their grave and to hear the words that were especially said to them from their grandfather that he had left behind. So it was a real time of blessing and encouragement. And it's wonderful when someone goes to be with the Lord and you're assured they're with the Lord. As the scriptures say, absent from the body, present with the Lord makes all the difference in the world. And there really was much rejoicing. And we thank the Lord for his life. And so I'll probably be going back and forth to Florida often for a little while to be a help to my mother-in-law. She's there right now by herself. And the Lord just gives grace and strength, and I thank the Lord for that. We had a wonderful service, a memorial service up here at Grace Chapel in Havertown. And it was quite an exciting event, and we thank the Lord for these things. But it's just funny. It seems like I was here the day before yesterday, so you'll forgive me. And I have a wretched headache. Normally I don't share how I feel about, you get up and the Lord gives you the strength to do something. But I got a wretched headache yesterday, and I don't get headaches. And then I started a computer class last night. And so I spent an hour and a half looking at this dumb little screen. That didn't help my head. So anyway, I'm here, and I prepared before all this happened. And so we'll trust the Lord that what I say makes some sense, whatever. As we look at the topics today of contentment, I don't know how you arrived this morning. I don't know what kind of start you had on your day, where contentment might be concerned. I don't know what your house looks like either. And thank the Lord you don't know what mine looks like after this last month. But we're going to talk about neatness and contentment. And I just trust that we'll get something from them that will be really practical. I not only want us, how do I want to say this? I not only want us to think about the fact that the Bible says we need to be content, or to be able to define contentment, but I want us to know practically how we can help our kids in these areas of life. There's a lot of discontent around us today, especially among young America. A lot of searching, a lot of who am I and where am I going, a lot of dissatisfaction, which is what discontent is. And we have given our children a huge gift if we are raising children who are content, who are thankful, who are grateful, who know how to forgive, who all these character traits that, Lord willing, as we go through this year, that the Lord will enable us to cover and become a part of us. I was talking to my daughter, who teaches first grade, and it was really interesting. Much of the information that we use and the thoughts come from John Stormer's book, Growing Up God's Way, and he says it's a guide for getting children ready for school and life from birth on. And when I read that title, I was thinking, the subtitle, A Guide for Getting Children Ready for School, I was thinking of the talk that Joy and I had last week, and concerning, how do I want to say this, kids' readiness, I guess it is, to go to school. And she said, Mother, how did you look at that when we were all getting ready to go to school? And it was funny. I never thought, I wonder if, when my child's 5, he'll be ready to go to school, or she'll be ready to go to school. I considered it, I suppose, looking back on it, my job, my responsibility, to get them ready to go to school. And she said, you wouldn't believe the kids we're seeing at school, not 1 or 2 in a class, but 9 or 10, who are not ready to be here. They can't leave their mother. They have no sense of independence. They're not satisfied kids. Everything has to go their way. They never learn to share. They can't pay attention. How come, Mother? I didn't feel that way when I went to school. And I had to laugh because, every mother loves it when the kids love to be near them. When this child of mine, the first one, went off to kindergarten, she never even looked back at the car. She got out of the car, ran into the building. It wasn't even a, I'll see you later, she never looked back. She was so excited to go. And I was determined that I was going to be the one to take her. 2 weeks before she started school, I had my third child, our first son, Jeffrey. And back then in the dark ages, you weren't supposed to drive or be in a car for all they're giving up on a lot of that. Pretty soon the pendulum will swing back and they'll be back again. But, I was determined that I was going to do that. And I can remember getting the baby up and feeding the baby and putting the baby in the, we didn't have all this, these car seats either. We had a car bed, which everybody, set it on the shelf, and hoped it didn't rock off. But anyway, and we went to school. I was a little crushed thinking about that. But the point is that you and I have the opportunity and responsibility to prepare our children to go to school. What does that mean to us as mothers? To prepare them, to teach them to be honest, to teach them to be kind, to teach them to be thoughtful, to teach them to be thankful, to teach them. And these are what the focusing from the Word of God on these character traits are supposed to help us to be able to do. Now, I know that God has given every single one of our children in this room a different temperament and a different personality and how it all meshes in our family unit. Every child is not the same. Some kids are more clingy than other kids. And anything you say, kind of good and godly, in a sense, exception. So if your kid is a little clingy, say, oh my goodness, isn't this awful? No, not necessarily so. It's how we handle the clinginess and how we handle any one of these things that we might about that makes all the difference in the world. It gives our children the ability to stand alone, because you're not going to be there when they're 16. To think independently, because you're not going to be there that's there to answer those questions and to respond to the temptations of sin along the way. And so it's important that we teach our children. And today we're going to concentrate on just two of these areas. The first is contentment. And contentment is really interesting. I can think of the first illustration of discontent, I suppose, when I think of Adam and Eve in the garden, and God had said, you can eat of everything else except. And so what did they do? There it is. It says, interestingly enough, it says in Genesis that Eve saw it was good. She saw the fruit on the tree, that it was good. It's also interesting. We won't take the time to look, but if you remember the story in Joshua chapter 7 about Achan and sin. And Achan's sin was he saw all of the booty from what they had conquered. He wanted it. He saw it and he wanted it. He wasn't content with what he had. He wanted it, and so he took it, he buried it under the tent, and as a result, we know there was a devastating loss of battle, loss of life, ultimately loss of his life, and the loss of the lives of all his family. Why? Because he saw something that he truly wanted and he had to have it. He was a discontent person. Well, it's interesting to really think of what discontent is. And it's really closely associated with covetousness. What I see, I have to have, and I have to have it now. Now, I wrote on here under contentment, A, B, C, D, that's all, A, B, C, D, and a few other numbers here along the way. But I want to suggest A, of some things that make us discontent. Number one, advertising makes our children discontent, creates covetousness. We've all noticed now in the middle of all the cartoons, we are suddenly inundated with toy advertisements. It is near the holiday time. And so our child wants one of everything they see. It's true. That's just the way we're kind of made. And I'll give some solutions, some helps along the way for what we can do about it. But advertising makes our children discontent. Who else in the family does it make discontent? Me. Why? Why?
You got to buy all
Because
this
a lot
stuff.
of times you don't want to buy. Well, it's set, the whole commercial thing with children is set up so the children nag the parents.
Right.
I said to my daughter one day, we were talking about TV commercials, and in fact, I said, just think of how really mean they are. Do you have the money to buy this?
Yeah.
She said, no. I said, who has the money? You do. I said, but they're talking to you. Why is this?
Yeah.
You're nag us.
Yeah.
So we get it for you.
Yeah.
It's mean.
Yeah.
I think it makes you discontent because a lot of things you don't even realize that you don't have until you see a commercial or see it in a catalog.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what it does? It makes you and it keeps you from appreciating what you already have. You cannot concentrate on God's goodness and what you have already because your thought patterns and mindset is so on what you're deprived of. Because somebody else who spoke to you through this little box that you turned on in the living room and told you that you had to have this or this or this or this or this, whatever the new gadget is. And so much of it is gadgetry or fad in the sense that next year we don't remember where it was, what we did with it, if it got broken, did we throw it away, type thing. But that's the way Madison Avenue is designed. It is designed and it to create within us that need to buy, because what's important is the dollar. All right, advertising makes us discontent. It creates covetousness. It's interesting, I asked of Rockefeller, and I'm sure you've heard this many times before, just how much money do you need to be content? He said probably just about $1 million more than I'll ever have. Because no matter how much you have, it isn't enough. I remember years and years ago, well, I guess 26 or 27 years ago, when we were first married, and Steve was making a certain salary. I remember that a friend of his got a better job and was making like $40 more a week. And I remember saying to Steve, you know, if you ever make this amount of money, we'll be set for life. Nowadays, we spend that much on groceries. You know how that goes in the supermarket. You know, it just, you think that this is the end all, and we realize that it isn't, and for many, many reasons. But everything in advertising is designed to create within us the desire to want something. Secondly, B, the verse in Philippians 4:11 is a really neat verse. The Apostle Paul is a very practical man. Philippians 4:11 says, not that I speak from respect of want, for I have learned that whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. And then he goes on to say, I know how to get along with nothing. I know how to get along in prosperity. In other words, things don't mean anything to me. I've learned in whatsoever state I am, whether there's an overabundance in the checking account or we're down to $1, you know, I have learned that whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Because in verse 13 it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. Now it's interesting, you and I probably quote that verse to ourselves often when we need strength to do something. Like I thought about it on the bridge coming over this morning and my pounding head, and I thought, well, the scripture's saying, and I thought, well, that's really taking it out of context. Paul said it here in the idea that I know how to have a lot, I know how to have nothing, it doesn't really matter to me. I know how to go hungry, I know how to have a lot to eat, he says in verse 12. I've learned to be content. And the happy part here is the word is what? Learned. I've learned to be content. What in the world does the word content mean? And you know, there's a real good biblical definition in the sense that to be content is to be satisfied with the circumstance that God has dealt to us, that God has allowed to come our way. That is contentment. And I have a perfect up-to-date illustration that I don't know whether God did this for the course this morning or my husband got to work on Monday morning, and he's an instructor at Philadelphia Electric, and is inundated these days, working a lot of, not a lot, but several hours a week of overtime. And he's always in different ways in different jobs at PE had overtime. And we have our children in Christian school based on Steve's, dependent on the Lord to supply Steve's overtime and to pay for a Christian school. And we have for 20 years, and God has been faithful for 20 years. I expect that he'll continue to be faithful for however much longer it takes to get them all through. And with Jeremy this year, I'm not sure how long that's going to take. But anyway, it was interesting. Steve got to work on Monday morning, and he called and he said, well, hon, he said, there's a note on my desk this morning, all overtime cut until January 1. And then there's the silence. And I said, hey, the Lord's provided our needs all these years. I don't know how he's going to do it, but the Lord's going to provide our needs for that. It's just going to be fine. He walked in the door, and I couldn't wait to see him. I said, weren't you amazed at my response? Because it's really, really true that God will supply our needs. We need to be content with what we have. And we get all wrapped up in what there is out there that we don't have. And so we were discussing it at the table the other night. I said to my Jeffrey, hey, Jeffrey, don't you remember the time that Daddy and I took a walk around the block deciding where we were going to find enough money for a gallon of milk? We had missionaries staying with us. Not that we don't have, that you might not have a CD somewhere, or that you might not have stock in some company, but you normally don't sell a share of stock to get a gallon of milk. You know, this is called cash on hand, and what are we going to do? And you know, the Lord meets every need. So much of it is dependent on our attitude, and it's that kind of a thing that we need to come across to our kids, and we're going to talk about that as we go. But Philippians 4:11 says that we need to be content, and that we can learn to be content, and we can teach our children to be content. Now, C, how do you do that? I just want to say that number one, 1 Timothy 5:8 says that we need to provide for our children's real needs before we get off on the wrong foot. Let me read 1 Timothy 5:8. It says, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." The Bible clearly says we need to meet the needs in our family. Our children should not be discontent because we're not meeting their needs. We need to think about that carefully. We need to meet that need they have for emotional support. We need to meet the needs that they have to be fed well and to be nourished, cared for, and to be warm and all that. Number one, we need to establish by showing them these things how good and content and fulfilled and happy they can be having those needs met. Some are deprived those needs and have a reason to be discontent. If they go to school without breakfast every morning because nobody made it for them or encouraged them to eat them, or they're not warm enough because they don't have a jacket or not warm enough winter clothes or whatever because they're not cared for. So we're not talking about that. We need to provide for those real needs that our children have. We don't want to neglect their needs, and I keep saying the word needs, but you and I need to be careful as mothers that we're not providing all those wants. There's a big difference. If you and I are providing everything they want, we are feeding that area of contentment or discontentment in our children. If they grow up in a household where everything they wanted, they always got, what kind of an adult will they be? You tell me. Selfish? What else? Discontent? Why? Because tell me how their boss is going to act. Going to give them everything they wanted right away. No. Tell me how their wife is going to feel about them. You're raising a son who just gets everything whenever he wants it. You know, you wait on him hand and foot, you meet every single need, and then he gets married and his wife can't understand why. He just has to have everything he sees all the time. What's that going to do to that family budget? Because, you know, it's amazing. We think, oh, this is a needful area. Contentment, you know, and some days are good, some days are not good. It's just kind of like, it's not true. You and I have the opportunity, we together, to teach our children to be content with such things as they have. We need to not neglect the needs, but do not provide for all of those wants. Now, D, what are the steps to take? What are the steps to take? And I want to suggest 5, 6, 7 things here that are helpful in teaching children to be content. Number 1, and some of these are going to sound really strict and strange, and it will never go in your house. Probably maybe sometimes because we were afraid to try, or we didn't want to create any attention or whatever. But number 1 is eat what is served or go hungry. Interesting. Eat what is served or go hungry. Because you know what? They will learn that what you provide is nourishing and satisfying, even though it might not be their favorite thing.
Can they
Food is a big area of discontent and being picky. Huge area. What were you going to say?
Can they leave it?
Can they leave it? Well, now I'm going to say, can they leave it? I'm going to say that's dependent upon what you and your husband decide is the family rule in your house. It's either eat everything on your plate or eat what's here or go hungry. You're getting a house. Now, you know, that's almost the same thing in a sense, if you get my drift, because they're going to come back, ultimately, maybe not the first day or the second or the first month or the second, but ultimately they realize they don't eat what's on the plate, they will be hungry, they will eat it. But eat what's or go hungry. Now let me give you some things that'll take away the friction. Let your children and help your children, even at a young age, to serve themselves, and they must take something of everything's on the table, but not necessarily the portion you take, and we need to think like a child and like a child's stomach, and we might give them too much. So we need to be very careful here. But we've taught our children they need to take something of everything that's on the table. And then along the way, we realized there were some foods that for different reasons they couldn't tolerate. And so we allowed them to choose one food they could absolutely say no thank you to. I had a daughter who could not eat bananas. She got sick with the texture of bananas. It wasn't that she didn't like the taste. She loves banana ice cream. She loves banana bread. She couldn't stand the texture of bananas. And so she said no to bananas. And another says no to fresh tomatoes, who eats pizza like there's no tomorrow. You know how that goes. But so we allow them to say no to one particular thing, but they must try something of everything that's on the table. And if they didn't take enough, and Daddy says, you know, you're trying to get away with murder here, I'll be happy to help you and with more. That makes the child take enough. You know, but it makes them realize that my mother is satisfying the hunger in my stomach. I don't have to have pizza every night, cookies an hour after dinner or 5 minutes before, you know, and food is something which all of us have difficulties with. I have big signs on my refrigerator, you know. We all want to satisfy the way we feel about things and what food does to us and means to us, and that's totally another subject. My point is, did you think about food in the area of making your child content with what you provide? Because everybody else isn't going to cater to those needs, and it's teaching a child that whatever he wants and whenever he wants it, he can have it. Everybody waits on me. All right? Number 2, teaching a child to finish what they start. And you say, well, how does that contribute to contentment? I already told you. Teaching children, I hope if I took these glasses off, to finish what they start, because they gain satisfaction. They gain satisfaction from completing a task. How do you feel knowing that at home are 3 unfinished tasks? My dinner dishes from last night, when I got up from the table, I left them. I couldn't face the dinner dishes, and I left them. Now I have to understand my one daughter's married, the other one's off to college, and mine are helpful, but both of them had a lot of homework. I said, leave it. I'll care for it later. And so that's what I'm going to. But that does not create satisfaction. We all know how that is when things are left undone. Teaching a child to finish the task he has started gives him a bit of satisfaction and contentment. And making him do that all along the way will give you an adult who will finish what they start too. Number 3, this is a hard one when we have small children, and most of you do. Play with their own toys. Now, not that they can't share and play with other people's toys, but listen to the rest of the statement. Play with their own toys because they must learn, are you ready, that displays and tantrums never get results. You know what it's like when they want to play with a toy that somebody else has. Or they simply want you to buy them something else and they're not going to play with that anymore. We all probably have trunks of toys that got played with for 15 minutes and trampled on, or played with for 15 minutes, didn't like it anymore, or whatever. But we're teaching children to be content by playing with their own things. They don't always have to have what the other kid has. And that's kind of hard, isn't it? Kid got a big wheel down the street, so you can't afford big wheel this month, you know. Or the kid on the street got a scooter. Or the kid across the street from us got these $100, what do you call it, boots with the wheels on for the single roller skates, which are great for playing street hockey. And in our house, when the kids want something that's expensive, we discuss it, they kind of earn it, and we chip in a little after a certain age. You know, no way that I think that was a necessity. I didn't even think that was a sensible want in my book. Could be a great longing desire if I were a millionaire. But even then, I wonder what I'd do with my money. But anyway, we need to be careful, and it's hard to know the balance of everybody in the block having one of these and our kids not. And if we are raising a child that has learned that I can just have anything I want, and until I get it, I'll lay on the floor and whatever in the supermarket or whatever, and carry on. And if they learn that they can get along and away with those kinds of things and that kind of behavior, we're really up a tree. All of us know families where the 2-year-old runs the show. We all know families where the 4-year-old tells everybody what to do because parents just don't know what to do. And kids get their own way. We have to teach our children early on that temper tantrums aren't going to get any results. And you know what? They stop because that's why they're doing them, to get their added and the needed and the wanted result. And you say, yeah, but in a supermarket, hey, I'm not responsible to all these people watching me in the supermarket. I'm responsible to the Lord. And so if they want to have a tantrum, I'll see you in the next aisle. You know, and I get down the end of the aisle and walk around, and my word, I'm out of view, and the kid got right up and shot right after me because, Mommy, where did you go? You know, it's amazing. You think they're crying in the whole world, and see, the pressure comes from everybody else in the supermarket. The pressure's really not coming from the kid. You wouldn't handle it that way if the kid were at home. All these massive people's watching you. You get my point. Number 4, creating rather than getting or buying. Creating rather than getting or buying. How many times do you have far more fun with a bag of rubber bands and clothes than they do a $39.95 toy that you. And when you pay that much money, doesn't it kill you that you're not playing with it anymore? But we don't give our children creative things to do, to stir their minds and to develop their thought patterns and all. We give them things that are monotonous lots of times to just sit and do. Not that they shouldn't have any toys at all, but what I'm saying is we think we have to spend so much money and that the kids have to have what they see in the stores or on the television or whatever, and we do not foster creativity. We think we have to get this and buy this and buy this. Number 5, may I suggest in one of the steps here to take number 5 to be careful what your children watch and see. Be careful what they watch and see. If you want them to be content with what they have, don't give them Sears Christmas Wish Book and say, here, you can just look at this. We're not buying anything, but you can just look. How do you feel when you get the Spiegel catalog or the Sunday paper and and you look through the fashion section and think, oh, I have one of them, one of them, one of them, one of them. Now, I know I'm not going to buy any of them, but it makes you think like, boy, the whole world's dressing better, or whatever it might be. We create that kind of thing. And I already told you the illustration of Achan and his sin. He just looked. He saw, and that was the first thing. That's always the first thing in sin. We see it, and then we want it. Whether it be our neighbor's house, our neighbor's car, as the scripture talks to men about, your neighbor's wife, whatever. Remember when David was on the housetop in 2 Samuel 11, is it? And he saw Bathsheba. And he wanted her. Now, it also was interesting that in the verse before that, it says that it was the spring of the year when all kings go to war. David was not in the right place. He was where he shouldn't have been in the first place. And he saw something, and he wanted it. And he took it. Okay? It's as simple as that. And it was, we know that the repercussions, the ramifications of that were just whoa. The fellowship that was broken between David and the Lord, and that which David had to bear in his life because of his sin. But it's looking, it's seeing first. So be careful what your children watch and what they see. And you know what that does to us girls? It puts a lot of responsibility on, and what are we doing with our time in the day when we're spending? We can be spending with our kids doing really profitable and neat things. They have lunch, take their afternoon nap or whatever. No, we need to get our work done around the house, true thing. But this is a profession. It's a job. It's a career. And it's more than a 24-hour-a-day responsibility that we have. Instead of poking the kids in front of the TV to see cartoons even that we carefully picked out, look at all they're seeing in the cracks between. We need to be careful. Not that we should never let them. And not that Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers can't be good, or Counting One, or whatever, or the excellent books that they read on Channel 12. It's good when you get the Sunday paper to see what Channel 12's doing with books. They take some real good kids' classics and read through them, focusing on the pictures. That's neat. That's neat even for small children who will watch things that move, good literature and so forth and so on. But you and I have that responsibility to spend that time to help them in this area. Now, A, I gave you the illustration of David and Bathsheba and Achan and whatever. But B, when I'm saying being careful what they watch and see under 5, B is window shopping. Try to avoid window shopping. Make shopping trips for your needs and wants, for the things you can afford. For your needs and for what you can afford. We need to be careful about that. Why do I say that? What in our society today, and everybody's joking now about plastic money. We overspend. And how do we do that? Well, with this piece of plastic and this piece of plastic. And if your house is like my house, I kid you not, we get barraged at least 3 times a week with a new bank that wants to give us an astronomical amount of credit already pre-approved. I think we could have every bank's MasterCard, couldn't you? And Discover, that was the latest, only that came on the phone. They want to give us a Discover card with a real great rate, and they pay you back at the end of the year. That's only, of course, have you not had any service charges all through the year, you paid it monthly, and which of us is going to do that on 87 pieces of plastic? We need to be so careful. But see, we have to have this thing. Well, it's interesting what you don't have to have, what you can put aside, what you can make do with, what you could do together instead of doing this. It's really So that's one way you can help your kids. To avoid window shopping, making shopping trips for the needs and for what you can afford. This is number C. This is hard too. Friendships with children whose families substitute things for love. Now, you say, but the kid down the street is so sweet. You just need to be really careful and really aware. How are you aware of the kids that your children play with? But friendships with children whose families substitute things for love. And he'll give them anything saying, well, if I don't give it to him, my kid won't think that I love them. That's not true. And you know that's not true. But our kids don't know they have a hard time discerning. They're only small about those friendships. Now, number 6, handle the wish that your children have by showing how they can earn it or showing how it's not needed. Sometimes we do want to meet those wishes, those desires. And so we show them how that they can earn extra money, helping you with the dishes, raking leaves, if that's not a part of the things they do around the house. And however it is financially, decide with your kids as they grow older. Most of you have small kids. But if we have something really big the kids want to do when they're older, like Jeremy, he's 14, he's gone to Word of Life's big Super Bowl thing. I must be getting old. I used to think that was great. This is where you go to the 76ers game, and then you have a God and Country rally, and then you do 2 hours of roller skating, 2 hours of bowling, 2 hours of something else, and then you eat breakfast, and the whole thing costs $23. And I'm going, Jeremy, you're going to be so tired. He's going, Mom, I'm not going to be tired, Anyway, that's $23. I said, Gerald, we'll pay half. You pay the other half. And so you can earn that money, or, with your job that you have on Saturday over at the warehouse or whatever it might be. But help them to handle the I wish things, because we all have wishes and things for which we save, and it helps the kids to save. And our point isn't to talk about the finances of it all this morning. Our point is how to make our child content, or to help to make them content. Now, number 7 is you and me in a real sense, because we personally need to realize God's provision for our own needs and live a life that verbalizes that in front of our kids. If we are constantly saying, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, I wish we could afford this, it's like everything we have just isn't enough, it isn't good enough. We don't express verbally how God is providing for our needs. We don't refer to God's control in daily living, verbally. We don't express that, hey, whatever God is doing, He is in control, even though we don't understand. We had the funniest thing happen in our family. We used to have, follow with me here, 5 drivers and 4 cars. Now we have, because one daughter got married, took her car. Imagine that. She took her car. Anyway, now we have 4 drivers and we have 3 vehicles. They're all old. In fact, when we were at the over at the Notary Publics the other day and putting a car on the road, and he said, I said, we have all old cars and they're all falling apart. I said, he said, that's the kind of cars you own? I said, yeah, because we also own children. You know how that goes. When all the children finally grow, then we'll get something that maybe will, be nice and last a little longer. We were, last week, just a week ago today, I was teaching Moms Unlimited in my own church. And June had her car. She's in college and co-op, and she was down at Metropolitan Hospital working. Her car stopped at 30th Street Station, and all the water just came right out of the thing. My son called and said, Mother, I'm on 320. I have to get to school. He has a car at Widener University. I have to get to school for an exam. I happened to have Steve's car. I had gotten up at 5 and taken him to the train. I happened to have Steve's car. I could teach at Mom's. And so I said to Jeffrey, I'll come get you. And so I went and got him, and it's a long involved story of how, but then we only ended up with 1 car. And I needed it for something. And so Jeffrey took his bicycle and went to Widener, but he had to have his bike. We have several bikes, so only one good one. Jeffrey took the bike to Widener and had to be back from Widener in time for Jeremy to take the same bike to the orthodontist. This is a family who once owned 4 cars. So it was just really kind of comical. But that's our attitude toward it. We all got to where we had to go. God made every need. Cars, they're just a piece of metal, and it's just really neat to just see we can minister to one another through these silly, dumb things that happen. But we talk about these kinds of things around the table because God supplies our need. We don't need a new car every time one comes out. And whatever, and you know that too. But it's just kind of atmosphere in the home that God has provided so overwhelmingly for our needs. And not only that, in his graciousness has given us so many of our wants, hasn't he you? And we want to come across to our kids in just that same way, so that they're not always, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me, and everything I see I have to want. I have to have that toy. I have to have that skirt. He has my car, my little play car. Oh, and I want to play with it now, and whatever. And you and I, just in some of these things we've suggested today, it might really be helpful to incorporate some of these that might help our kids to be more prepared to go to school, more prepared to face life, just being content with such things as you have. Because Hebrews 11 says that we're to be, Hebrews 13, I'm sorry, says that we're to be content with such things as we have because he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. And I often think, no matter what I have or I don't have, as life goes on, I will always have God's presence. I will always know his forgiveness. I will always know there's a place prepared for me in heaven because I've trusted him in the shed blood of his son. These are things that nothing, 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 nothing can touch. And that is a great heritage that we can pass on to our children. We're going to talk about neatness, and I thought that word would make everybody groan. And we'll do this next maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll take some questions about either topic or some things you'd like to share relevant to today's topic. And if I might say one more thing about contentment, again about neatness, I just pray that the Lord will help each one of us as we think of our own lives as women to be content with what the Lord is doing with us, to be content that he's doing something with us if we're quite not understanding the stage that we're in or the hardness of our circumstance right now, to be able to be content and totally satisfied with who God is and with what he is doing. I think it was when I was reading the book of Job, and we know what Job went through in his difficult circumstances, and we know how God gave back to Job all that double at the end, except he had the same number of sons and daughters because the others were in glory waiting for him. But Ryrie had a wonderful note at the end of Job on contentment. He talked about the fact that Job finds contentment in the knowledge that he has God's fellowship. This is a great lesson of the book. If we know God, we do not need to know why he allows us to experience what we do. He is not only in control of the universe, but of all facets of our lives, and he loves us. Though his ways are sometimes beyond our comprehension, we should not criticize him for his dealings with us or with others. God is always in control of all things, even when he appears not to be. And you see, Job was content in that knowledge, that God was in control. And I just trust that the Lord will help us in our lives as women personally to gain a great sense of contentment. 1 Timothy 6:6 says that godliness with contentment is great gain. And we are so often discontent as women, more especially sometimes I think than men. We are discontent with our wardrobe, with our house, with our husband's job, with the lack of money, even though we might not say that out loud at times. And it's amazing what children pick up. And so much of what we learn is not really taught, it's more caught. That which we try to teach our children, they learn it by watching us, and it's just the attitudes, they catch on to them. And so it's really important in our own lives that we be content. With neatness, you want a Bible verse? Just love this one. It says in 1 Corinthians 14:40 that we're to do all things decently and in order. Go on, yo. 1 Corinthians 14:40. That's letter A. Do all things decently and in order. Now we'll talk about that a little more as we go on. B. Think of our greatest example, God himself. God is a God of what? Order. How best can you tell that? Yeah, just look around, especially on gorgeous days. These same trees lost their leaves last year. I remember the day well. It rained. When I was taking a group of kids several years ago, I took a group of high school girls in a van camping in Canada. I love to camp. And we had a big off from church, And we went out through Ohio. And you know, Ohio's kind of flat. Spent the first night at a state park on Lake Erie. And in the middle of the night, I had to get up for something, and I went out of the tent, and I was overwhelmed. Because being flat, you can see from horizon to horizon. And being away from any major city, I never saw so many stars in all my life. I thought I was at the planetarium. You know, never saw so many stars. I woke up all the kids. I said, you got to come out and see this. You'll never see this in Greater Philadelphia, never. I said, come out and look, you know. What a God, what a creator we have. What a God of order. At the rate that the whole universe travels, at the rate that the sun and the moon, the earth, and so forth and so on, we know that where they a second off, it ultimately collide and whatever. He's such a creator. There is such order in the universe, in everything we see. And so we say, well, we can't quite accomplish that, and you're right. But think about this. What order really is, and what neatness really is in the life of your family, and what you're teaching your children. And this statement will make us all relax. Listen, preparing myself and my surroundings so that I can achieve the greatest efficiency. And that's going to be different in every single house. It's not like, here's my standard, let me put it on the board, and all of you follow it, and harmony will ensue. It's not true. Preparing myself and my surroundings so that I can achieve the greatest efficiency. How are you teaching your first grader to be neat about his homework? All right, do we have a plan in place for him to do his homework with a good light and sharpened pencils, and or whatever the thing might be? Are we creating that kind of atmosphere that enables that child, to be efficient in carrying on what he has to carry on? But it's preparing myself or preparing my child to learn, you know, and my surroundings so that I can achieve the greatest efficiency. That's what neatness is, and it'll be different in every one of our households, dependent on the standard in our household or the need in our household. Now, C, let me give you 4 ways to encourage small children toward neatness. Notice I didn't say to become perfectionists. It's hard to live with a perfectionist. Because perfection is impossible, that's why. And we're always striving for something we can never attain. And you know, there's 2 kinds of perfectionists. They're always striving, and those that say, I know I can't make it perfect, so I won't even start. I tend to think in these later years I become that kind of a perfectionist. But anyway, number 1, organize the care of your possessions. If your child has 83 toys, there's no way that a 2-year-old can organize 83 toys. Or that a 4-year-old can have 17 puzzles on the floor all the time. I hope you've gotten smart and color-coded the backs, or you just spend forever separating to pieces. But my point is, we need to help small children to organize their own personal possessions. To go through their rooms and say, well, look, we have too many things in here for you to take care of. No wonder you can't pick them all up. You know, wouldn't you go into a room, a playroom, and thought, my word, where do I begin? How do you think a short person with less intelligence does that? I don't know where to begin. And so to go through the child's room and say, okay, pick 3 puzzles, pick 10 toys, pick 20 books. We'll put all the rest in a big box with your name on them. We'll store them on a shelf in the basement. When you get tired of all of these, we'll put all of these away, and you can pick out 20 more books, 10 more toys, or whatever it might be. Now you say, well, that takes time, and that's monotonous. Yes, but motherhood takes time. And the monotonous will pass when the child is able to feel great satisfaction from picking up everything, putting it in its place, and it looks like he can find the stuff that's on the floor instead of not being able to see the rug because of all the stuff that's all over it. Number 2, attention to grooming with small children teaches neatness. Making a little chart that hangs on the back of the bathroom door that has a picture of a washcloth and a picture of a toothbrush and a little cup there full of stickers. And when he brushes his teeth, he can put his own sticker on for Monday, for Tuesday, for Wednesday, for Thursday. And you say, oh, I can just tell him brush his teeth. You're not going to be there when he's 21 to tell him, did you brush your teeth? But when a habit is established, you know how that goes. It was interesting. Did you ever think how many steps are involved in doing any kind of mundane thing? Like brushing your teeth, you have to go into the bathroom, turn on the water, take the toothpaste, take off the cap, take the brush, put it on. You could have 20 little fun things. You can make games out of lots of things when children are 2 and 3 years old. They think it is just such fun to do something like that when they're small. But what becomes a habit of life carries on and carries on and carries on. So that you do have children that are 17 that are brushing their teeth. We have one child, and just to be funny, but to remind him, because he just has lapses of memory about these things, I'll just yell, please make sure you brush at least the front ones. At least the front ones. Brush them. Everybody sees them. Brush at least the front. You know, we have to encourage our kids along the way about neatness and grooming. Make a picture of a comb so he combs his hair. My father-in-law was funny. One of the things he said when I was down there, he and I were riding, and the last thing he ever did, that he ever bought, he bought a pad for the chair for Mother, because it was really a hard chair, and he wanted this pad. So you have to know my father-in-law, he tape measured the chair, and then we went to the Walmart down there and tape measured every pad until we found one that was exactly the right. And then we went to the supermarket, and the last thing he bought was a 6-pack of Hires root beer. He was always great for soda for breakfast. Yeah, that's what I said. But so I had to laugh because when the family all arrived on Sunday, and the kids, there were 16 grandchildren there, ages 2 to 24, when all wanted something to drink, they all brought out grandfather's soda, and it was just really neat. Why did I start to say that? I can't even remember now. My father-in-law said to me, you never asked me why I comb my hair straight back. He said, did you ever wonder why I never had a part in my hair? And he was a man who combed his hair straight back. And I said, no, Daddy, I never thought about it. Why? He said, well, my mother always thought, and she was real like a rigid with her thinking, always thought that everybody should have a part on either this side or that side. He said, so I combed my hair straight back, and he did all his life long. So he was 70 years old. He always carried. It was just kind of comical, you know. But his mother figured at least he combed it, you know. And I have to laugh. And I know at the windows, but all of you with young children, how we always as mothers get inside the church door, and out comes the comb, and you're standing there in the hallway because in the car, you know, with the wind, everybody's hair got whatever. But teaching, giving attention to those things, makes a kid think, there's something important here that is important enough that my mother's continually telling me about this, or we have charts hanging, it must be important to do. We look at the kids who are disheveled late in their teenage life, who have no caring for themselves. Now, take heart. Boys go through a period, I always talk about the fact that kids from like 8 to 15, those are struggling years. And you know, maybe it'd be nice to like put them in a closet over here and open the door at 15 and let them out. Not really. Not really. But you have to say, you have to take a shower. I don't want to hear another word about it. I said so. You get a shower. Now, when they get to be around 14, 15, can't keep them out of the shower. They're in the shower all the time, you know. The water bill is going, you know, it's just really kind of interesting. Some things do come into play of their own. Other things we need to be more careful to teach. Number 3, want to teach a child neatness. Part of that is manners at the table and at other places. Please pass the sock around the table, not across, whatever the manners are that you've decided for your home. But teaching a child those kinds of things helps them to know there is an order, there is an expected way to do things. And then when they go out, they feel proud of themselves, or satisfied, I should say, with themselves, that they know how to perform well in public and they're not embarrassed. And it's a big thing, especially if you're a young man, especially when you begin to date. But manners at the table and other places. Number 4, and this is a big one, especially for little boys, legible handwriting. We need to help our children to develop legible handwriting. That's a part of neatness. Now, I know that's a part of personal preference, that's a part of acceptability with a teacher and whatever, so I'm not going to... but these are small things that we as mothers with preschool children can help to do right now where the kids are. And then it will make a big difference as they grow. Now, D, let me say this. The neatness ought not to be greater than their ability to perform. Okay? We need to be careful. We can be really put down. Because number 1, when a small child is learning to feed themselves, we know what that looks like. But we also know that the food around the mouth will eventually get in. You know, eventually. And it's okay that it all doesn't. Okay? Number 2, encouragement is needed. Encouragement. Notice I said encouragement. Girls, what does encouragement do? It builds up. It does not tear down. We need to encourage. We have a way of speaking to our children often that's like put down. Oh, your hair. You know, right away the kid thinks his hair is unacceptable. You know, my son came to the table after working a hard day with several lawns, and he had his hat on. The hat's not acceptable at the table. So we're bowed our head to thank the Lord for the food, and everybody had their eyes closed. He took his hat off, and then before we got our eyes open, he had the hat back on. I said, Jeffrey, you know what I think of hats at the table? This is my son who's relatively shy, but very witty. And he merely took the hat and said, would you rather this? Well, you should have seen his hair at the table. So we made an exception for that. But it's encouragement. I'm sorry, number one is, I just used an example as number one, that the food around the mouth eventually gets in. In other words, be patient and be tolerant with the age that you're trying to teach your child something and don't look for perfection. Number two, use encouragement. Number three, a practical way to teach your child neatness and order. Allow them to help you sort the socks and make them match, because things ought to match. It reminds me of a dumb thing I did. I was helping somebody move. These were friends of our family, and we were getting them resettled into retirement. And he is very much a perfectionist, and everything is in rows. Would drive me nuts. I mean, you know, but everything is in rows. So when we carried in all the men carried in all the dresser drawers. I pulled all the socks apart and I put them together in different colors, and I put them all back in the nice neat rows. Oh, isn't that terrible? Anyway, that teaches a kid that things have to go together. And you might think, well, I can do that much faster than they can. Oh, sure we can. We can do anything faster than they can do, but that's not the point. That's not the point, and they can help. Number four, staying in the lines of a color book teaches neatness and order, and helping them to do that. That also helps when you help them to develop the motor control of those smaller muscles that need to be developed for when they go to school and are able to hold a pencil. But getting on the floor with crayons and color book is such fun. It was such fun for a reward for something really special to go to the 5 and 10 together and pick out a new skinny coloring book with a box of crayons that we could all color in. That's such fun. When I was in Italy this past summer involved in missions, while I was there, my girlfriend Diane had a birthday. And you couldn't buy wrapping paper. We couldn't find wrapping paper to wrap presents anywhere. So Carissa, she's 5, and John Mark is 3. The 2 kids and I got on the floor and we pulled apart a color book, page by page, till we thought we had enough pages. And then we colored the pictures and we taped all the pages together. And we made our own wrapping paper. Well, we had a fun time doing that, and it was teaching a lot of different lessons. And just a simple thing, but it really taught a lot, and it was a lot of fun to do. Number 5, dirty clothes go in the hamper. Clean ones go in the drawers. Any of you have trouble with that? Any of you have husbands who have trouble with that? Dirty clothes go in the hamper. Clean ones go in the drawer. Children can help you do that. There's order. There's form here. Number 6, toys are in their proper place, and the child puts them back. I may play with these, but they have to go back. And like I say, you need to think through your own house and think what are the good rules to lay down for such things. In our house, you could play a game, you could play 10 games, but you can only play them one at a time. You get a game out, that's fine. When you're finished playing with it, put it back before you get another one out, or else what happens? There are 7 games on the dining room floor or on the picnic table in the backyard, and the pieces get combined and whatever, and nobody wants to clean up the mess. Nobody ever wants to clean up the mess. So silly and simple things like this teach a child that there is order. When you're getting ready for lunchtime, what do we usually say to our children if they're old enough to do it themselves? Wash your hands. Wash your hands. Go and wash your face and hands, maybe go to the bathroom, and come for lunch. There's something we do before we eat, so that hopefully as adults, we wash our hands before we eat. You know, or when we change our clothes, what do we suppose to do with them? Well, we hang them up if they're still clean, or we put them in the hamper. We don't throw them under the bed. We don't wolf them into our brother's room next door. We don't, I mean, they're supposed to be in order. We had such a good time last night at the table. Just my boys were home. Oh, my head. Just my boys were home, and they're, I've always done 19 and 14. And we were at the table, and they just started to horse around as we were leaving the table. And we had this bendable ruler that felt more like a piece of rubber than it did actually a ruler. And so Jeffrey was pinging it off of Jeremy, the oldest one, off of the youngest one. you know. And it's been a while, but I was over by the sink where my big wooden spoons are, and Jer's taking it real well and saying "ow" really loud, just to emphasize the point that somebody was doing something to him. And I really got my big wooden spoon out of the thing, and without even moving my body, I just really sliced Jeffrey on the side of his leg. And you should have heard a while. Well, that started running up the steps. And I ran with my wooden spoon, too. I mean, I wanted to be in on the fun, too. And I waited outside of Jeffrey's door, real quiet. He's 19. I mean, you have to have fun. Girls, life has to have humor to it, you know. Because life's hard out there. It's hard studying chemistry and physics and whatever, algebra and calculus and whatever. And you just need those good kinds of fun kind of family time together. And over the weekend, even talking about neatness, when my daughter June was home, she looked at Jeffrey's room. She said, Jeff, you need a little help. He says, I need a lot of help. And she said, I'll help you. You know, I'll help you get some things organized here, you know, so that you're better able to face the week. But my point is that the fun things, the little things, the continuing things that we do in these areas and the attitudes that we have really make a big difference. When I look at the illustration, maybe you could call this letter E there, and if you miss some, it doesn't matter. You can fill them in yourselves for things that you would think in this area. But I think of the illustration of the Lord Jesus feeding the 5,000. When I was reading that, I thought to myself, we think of it as the miracle that it was and of God's goodness and just showing that he was the Son of God and whatever. But I think, you know how there were all these people here and he had them sit down in groups of 50s and he prayed over the food and they served it and they brought it all back and the Lord blessed. There were 12 basketfuls left over. But there was order. And there needs to be some kind of order and semblance of order and neatness in our lives in the sense of developing a family unit and kids that know how to be orderly. Last week, it was our week to clean out at D.C. where my kids go to school. And we had 5 classrooms in the middle school. You know what middle school is, grades 5 to 8, or 6 to 8, 6, 7, and 8. You never saw such a bunch of desks in all of your life. They were, well, you know how middle school boys are. You know, there were papers out this way and out this way. It was really kind of interesting, and I thought, oh boy. And lockers with little papers sticking out the top and sticking out the bottom. Now, we're all that way from time to time. But my point is, we need to help our kids to be neat. And a lot of that perception comes in what your husband's expectations are. Some husbands don't see things in the same way that other husbands see things. Everything has to have a place, and everything that has a place, the thing has to be in its place, and others are not quite like that. And so every home will be a little different. But let me repeat again the definition in the sense of making myself and my surroundings in such a way that I can be efficient. And that's what's important, that we're not hampered by the disarray and whatever. Now, in the minutes that we have left, what questions or what thoughts arise concerning neatness or whatever? Yep, Burke.
About the coloring books and staying in the lines, what age are you talking about that they have to start staying in the lines?
Well, staying in the lines is not so much age as it is experience. You know, if your child's been coloring for a long, long time, the more they color, the better they'll be able to stand in the line and stay in the lines. And the older that they get, the better dexterity and control they have of those small muscles to be able to stay in the lines. But children, I've seen children who are 3 and 4 able to stay in the lines, and other children who aren't. But you're working toward that, and that just shows them, you know, and helps them.
So you're working,
You're working
encouraging
toward
it.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. Make it fun.
The comment about, you know, if you don't eat what's on your plate, you don't get anything. At what point? You know, I have a fussy 2.5-year-old who, I mean, dinner you might as well forget. Meat and vegetables are out the window with him. You know, do I send him to bed hungry at that age?
I would. I would. And there's about 50 other people in here shaking their head yes. He won't go to bed very many nights hungry like that. He'll eat it. He'll eat it. And sometimes children do that not because they don't want the food, they just want their way and show that they're in charge. Not that that's always the case, but sometimes it is.
I have a 6-year-old who I still have trouble with because I made that mistake. And I have a 3-year-old who just turned 4 who I didn't make the mistake. And he will go downstairs to the family room, leave his dinner, and in 5 minutes he'll come back and eat it.
I need it.
But the 6-year-old is still a problem. It's my fault.
It's a real survival instinct. Even a nursing baby, if a nursing baby bites you and you remove them from the breast, and you can't do that every time they bite you, they will stop because they know that they have to eat. But my other comment was, we have another rule besides having to eat your food, and that is, you're not allowed to tell me you don't like it either. By the time my fourth child, one would say, I don't like it, and even the ones that were eating heartily, the forks would go down. When a baby comes in, I said, that's it. You're not allowed to tell me you don't like it anymore. You can tell me at a later time, away from the table, you don't care for this meal. I want to know because, it's helpful for planning meals. But you're not allowed to tell me at the table, and it has really helped.
Yeah, my husband used to make them leave the table. I will not hear that at my table. Your mother made this food and you will eat it, so you may leave the table. And that only happens 2 times. They don't want to leave the table. Small children don't want to be separated from the fun that's going on. It's the 19-year-olds that say, oh great, I can't wait to get away from this.
Somebody wants to come in there.
Yes, right,
Would say that.
right.
I have a 12-year-old and I stay consistent with perfectionist, which I'm not really. However, I do expect them to take good care of what they have in their clothes. And they, of course, they don't hang things up like I would like them hung up. After I press them and take a lot of care in preparing them for them to wear, I get really upset with them. And I'm not ever sure how much pressure I'm putting on them. I mean, are they capable of doing things like I do? I mean, when I say to them, it's your day to fold laundry, I want it folded perfect. I don't want it folded haphazard, even down to my husband's t-shirts. I want them to learn how to do it neatly so that things look, and it's real hard. I put this guilt trip, maybe they're not, maybe they can't.
Well, you have to consider their age. You have to consider their time. You also have to consider, did you ever show them step by step how you want things folded? And I would encourage you to stay there with them and enjoy the conversation of folding together. No kid does well what they have to do alone if they're a people person. I have a son who'll rake every leaf off the side yard if you're there raking too, because he likes to do the job, but he likes to talk to you while he's doing it. If he has to do it by himself, he can't wait to get it done so he can go to where the people are. So there's lots of things to be considered. But God didn't make all of us perfectionist type, compulsive, whatever. And I don't know that you are, Gene, or not. But I'm just saying that you always have to consider whatever the factors are for your particular house. And mostly, you'll never get all of your children to be like you are. Maybe one will have those same tendencies, but probably the other 2 won't. But you have to follow through with the rule, the expectation for having the laundry folded. It might not be exactly the way you want, but then I don't know how you were when you were 12. And I have to say that to myself. I expect my son to think about this like I think about. I didn't think about that way till I was probably 35, and he's 19, and I expect him to think like me. It doesn't work that way. So that's hard. Anybody else have a comment? Yeah.
Oh, and not about that.
19.
I was under the contentment and presence and, just feeling satisfied with what you have. Well, I really try hard to do that. But then comes along Grandmom and Grandpa. And that is it's a constant, it comes up at least every 3 or 4 days. And what is really hard to, teach them that, all right, something's really important, we have to work toward it, it costs a lot of money, we want to make sure it's good so it can last, because it's important to us to have good things for you. And then comes Grandmom, who just buys anything, and I really do mean anything. And what we've been doing is talking to, especially my daughter, who's 4 now, saying, Grandmom buys this stuff and she really loves you and she really wants you to have it, but she doesn't buy the best quality. And it's really hard to find the right mix, because we also don't want to burst her bubble. Her grandparents are almost her favorite people.
Sure.
Well,
and grandparents are a special breed. I say this in the best way, with the most respect. They're a special breed unto themselves. And grandparents need to be that. Okay? Grandparents love to have the kids. They also love to give them back at the end of the time. And that's fine. We'll all get to that stage too. They tell me that they will anyway. Anyway, my point is that if grandparents are way too overindulgent, then if it's your parents, you need to speak to them. If it's your husband's parents, he needs to speak to them about being too overindulgent. But about the quality of things, I would put that aside. We all need to learn to accept, for the love and the thought that was given, the thing that is received. Okay, so I wouldn't worry so much about the quality, but if they're overindulgent, I would just kind of mention, and kind of handle that part of it, that they're being overindulgent, but I wouldn't allow that to affect the standard that we are doing, my husband and I, in our home, because children as they grow will understand this is the standard of our home, and grandparents are special. And that's a nice concept. That's a neat concept. We just have to hope that it will be fair, along the board.
Maybe other people feel this too, but this time of the year you start feeling pressure about what are we getting the kids for Christmas. You start browsing through everything. And my husband and I looked at that carefully last year and really put a real rein on things. And we did wonderful things. We went and cut down our own Christmas tree. We got to grandma's house for dinner. And we put a real emphasis on the special celebrations apart from toys and things. And it was a real blessing. And I just want to encourage other people to think of other happy family times that you can associate with all the holidays and to focus way down on.
Yeah. Well, and if you focus more on the giving than the getting, so will your children. Of course you'll have presents under the tree, but if your family focus is on putting together a holiday dinner for somebody in need or working on a project that you'll deliver together as a family, it shifts the focus. So of course there'll be presents. That's the point. That's not what we're focusing on, and you're right. And one guideline might help you all, especially if you have children who are like in elementary school, and the value of what $1 buys and what $100 buys. We always had a limit that we spent on each child, whatever it might be. It started out being $12 years and years ago. You could buy a lot of $25, but whatever. And so maybe your child only got 2 things, and another child got 7, but it was the same value. And if that child wanted the whole, one thing and knew that that was the limit, they were satisfied. Because that's what they wanted, and it's okay they only got the one thing, but the limit made it fair across the board, and nobody counted their presents. And oh, you got more than me or whatever, and that helped. Cornelia.
Something that's helped us, and my daughter's very young, she's only 3, but already I can tell is, and I don't know if this is given, but not to emphasize Santa Claus during the
Yeah.
holidays. I mean, Santa Claus is a story like Mickey Mouse in our house. But
Right.
basically, Christmas is
It's the birthday of the Lord Jesus.
period. And you can't get away from Santa Claus because everywhere there's a picture, so that we discuss him, even though sometimes I'd rather just like he wasn't there. So we discuss him, but basically he has nothing to do with Christmas celebration, and I think that
Right.
has helped a lot too, as
Yeah.
far as just
That helps to make it a more family thing too, and centered around the birth of the Lord than it does. Yeah, with Santa Claus and all. And we treated it like you do. We said it's a story like Peter Pan, like Cinderella, like it's just a story. It has nothing to do with
gratitude.
Yeah.
Something that you mentioned earlier about only watching Channel 12, my son is young, so that's probably helping, but he only watches Channel 12 in the mornings, and that's been a big help with not asking for things. And something else I wanted to comment was the empty plate. I think it's good that children not get anything else to eat after they've left the table, but I'm an empty plate child syndrome. Every time I go out to eat, I have to empty my plate, because that's what I was taught, so that's something I try to refrain from, that they have to clear their plate. However, that is all they'll get, until
Yeah. Well,
that time works.
the empty plate works out well if you let them spoon it on. If you took it, you'll eat it. Sometimes if we give it, we gave too much. But if you took that, you're going to eat that, and it really helps.
As far as the eating thing went too, we went through that with Kristen, she would shake her head no, she didn't want what you had. And I just stuck to my gun and said, that's it, you eat what's there, or you get nothing. I would not get up, temper tantrum or not, I would not get up and get her something else, and then she ended up finishing it, and then when we go out to eat, she's great.
Yeah, that's one of the blessings of having children who know order, who are willing to be obedient and eat what's in front of them. You have a great time at a restaurant, and you just love to go out as a family. It's great when you're all dressed up after you leave Sunday church. Go to a place that has a special for kids like Friendly's. 99 cents for the kids' meal. It's only $2.50 or something, whatever. We really appreciated that. I also make comments before we pray and go home.
Just, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old and a baby, but the 7-year-old is real good about doing what you tell him to do, but then my 5-year-old is, oh, do I have to? When you're telling him to pick up his things, why do I always have to do this work, Mom? This is his little 5-year-old. Why do I have to do this? I'm like, okay, so suppose the toys laid there and you walk on them and you step on them and you break them. Or suppose I said, I'm too lazy to cook dinner. Maybe we just won't eat. Is it just a matter of just keeping reinforcing that? No, you're going to do this. You're going to pick up after yourself. Because he's the one that comes back with the little, the bad attitude.
Well, at that age, when he says, do I really have to, I would simply, in a fun, offhanded, flip way, said, yep, you do. That's the way it is. That's life. And, of course, they develop a thing, well, it's not fair. And I always have told my kids, you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Life's not fair, but God is just. You see, God is just.
What should the punishment be, or what's the
The
consequence?
closet, always in the closet.
Not the children, the toys. You know, I mean, if you're repeatedly day in, day out saying, because my kids, I've said to them, I'll throw it out. And they say, go ahead, throw it out. Get
Yeah,
over
but see,
here, you know.
right,
I
don't
mean,
ever
but-
say what you're not going to do.
But I would do that.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
do
I
it.
would throw it out.
But when they keep nagging about a certain thing, after a while, after they've said it a few times, I'll say, hey, I've heard it before, I don't want to hear it again, I am not listening, and I'll go on with doing the dishes, and they can say it all they want, and they know I'm not giving them heed, and that drives small children to distraction. You're not listening. No, I said I wasn't going to listen. I'm not hearing that anymore. God gave us these short, small people. We have an illustration, to train and to mold, and I just have to smile at how much they can drive us to distraction because we let them. We let them. God has given another illustration. God has given us the ability to do that, girls, and don't ever think that you don't possess it. God says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not. And we do get at our wits' ends, and we do have lousy days, and we do get frustrated and pushed to the wall. But at those moments, we need to go to God and ask him for wisdom of what to do. When you hear your kid crying and they're heading toward the door and you wonder who punched them this time or whatever it might be, do you pray and say, Lord, I don't even know what the situation is, but give me wisdom when they get in the door. You get a warning note in the mail from school that the kid's not going to, and the kid's not even home yet from school. And you think, Lord, give me wisdom to handle this in the best way. Or they'll walk in the door and say, you know what I got today? I've been waiting for this. And the kids say, well, I'm glad you're waiting. I delivered just like you were waiting for, They live up to our expectations of them. And we need to be really careful. Well, it's time to close in prayer to go. Make sure you thank your babysitters. Babysitter. Father, we thank you for this time together, and we do pray that you will help us in these practical ways to be encouraged with our small children, to teach them to be neat, to teach them, Father, to be content. Then, Father, help us to be content with such things as we have, and to not constantly be looking around and comparing ourselves with others or even with ourselves and what we wish we had, but to be content with what you're doing in our lives, with what we have, with where you have placed us, because we are so very, very blessed simply to know you and to enjoy the salvation and the forgiveness of sins that we have. Thank you for each home and each family that's represented today, and we just ask your blessing, and we ask for wisdom to do those things which are good, and we'll thank you in Jesus' precious name for his sake.